So I'm doing my video on chapter 17. It's about a 19-year-old girl named Valerie who was parked at a red light early in the morning on December 29th in 2007 in El Paso, Texas. An SUV traveling an estimated 60 miles per hour rear-ended her and the car waiting beside her, but her car took the brunt force of the impact and she died. The driver was Staff Sergeant Edison Bias, and he was a soldier who had just returned from a tour in Iraq 10 days earlier. He was in charge with intoxicated manslaughter, and his blood alcohol content was 0.27, which is 3 times the legal limit. At the trial, the defense lawyer argued that Bias had PTSD and that he was having a flashback whenever the accident occurred, but had just not been diagnosed by Army doctors yet. Prosecutors argued that and said that Bias had a history of alcohol abuse, including 2 arrests and 4 referrals to the Army's substance abuse program. Raymond Herrera, who graduated 6 months prior from Texas State University, was working part-time for a CBS affiliate in Texas, and he was the one who covered Bias's trial. A few days into the trial, the judge's clerk tipped off the media that prosecutors would be showing the red light video of the accident. Neither the police or the district attorney would provide reporters with copies of the video, and cameras aren't allowed inside the courtroom. So reporters were worried that they wouldn't be able to show their viewers the most compelling piece of evidence from the trial. When the crash video was played, the pool camera, which takes video from outside through a window and then distributes it to all 4 major news sources in Texas, or in El Paso, one of the 2. The pool camera operator was able to aim through the window of the courtroom door, and he captured the footage. So the victim's father walked up to the group of reporters whenever they had breaked for lunch and, said, "I know it's part of your job to show this video, but could you please not?" essentially. And that made Herrera uncomfortable because watching the video in the court already gave him kind of a lump in his throat, and he really empathized with the father because he really couldn't imagine seeing his own daughter's last moments on earth. When Herrera and his photographer got back to the news station, they told his news director and executive producer of the father's request, and they all ended up watching the video together. So even though they all found it shocking, since no body or gore or blood was visible, the news director wanted to use the video in its entirety. And Herrera then presented the father's concerns about family members seeing it on the news for the first time, or seeing it on the news at all, and how emotionally traumatic that could be for them. And the news director pretty much just said, they shouldn't watch the news then. And Herrera said, "I guess you have a point." So they ended up running it on that night's newscast. In his lead-in to showing the video, Herrera explained that the district attorney introduced the video into evidence and warned the viewers that it was graphic. He thought it was essential in telling part of Valerie's story, though, and even though he did feel somewhat bad about doing that because the father had kind of asked them not to. Because none of the reporters promised the victim's father they wouldn't show the video, they didn't really they considered themselves to be free of any ethical conflict there. There was no telephone calls or emails that came from viewers after the video aired, and none of the family members complained about use of the video. Bias was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to pay a fine of $10,000. He appealed his case but lost. Herrera believed that it was a good learning experience for him as a young reporter. The only thing he said he would have done differently is to get to the video to the station ASAP during the lunch break so they could have posted it sooner, or be the first to post it, because that's kind of important when it comes to newscasting. I think that they handled this in a pretty ethical way. I think the main point was making sure not to promise the victim's father that they couldn't do that, or they wouldn't show it, because they don't have the authority to make that promise. It lies with the news director and executive producer. I think I would have probably handled it the same way. I think it was a pretty ethical decision, and though I think I would feel kind of like Herrera, I would still feel bad about it, but I knew that it's part of that story and it probably need to be shown to the public as well. So